At an upscale casino in the United States, a heavyset man, dressed in simple clothes, is stopped at the entrance to the VIP lounge by a white security guard. The guard narrows his eyes, blocking the man's way. "This place is for classy guests, not people dressed like beggars," he scoffs, his tone laced with contempt. The man says nothing. Calmly, he reaches into his pocket, and pulls out a sleek, black, gleaming card. The moment the guard sees it, his smirk fades. His expression shifts from arrogance to disbelief, his mouth slightly agape. Who is this man? Why does that card leave the guard speechless? What happens next will challenge everything you thought you knew about appearances. Stay with us to the very end, the truth will surprise you. A heavyset man with dark skin steps out of an old, weathered taxi, parked in front of one of the most exclusive casinos in Las Vegas. His hoodie is faded, stretched at the sleeves, and his jeans hang loosely, frayed at the hems. His shoes are scuffed, soles worn thin. He moves slowly, but with a strange sense of calm. In his right hand, he pulls a small, black suitcase on wheels, that clicks quietly against the polished pavement. The doorman gives him a passing glance, then quickly looks away, uninterested. The man doesn't flinch. He pushes open the tall glass doors, and enters the grand marble lobby of the casino. The space is all luxury, with gold trim, crystal lights, and velvet-lined walls, and silence follows him like a shadow. Heads turn. Conversations drop to a hush. He doesn't react. His steps are even, his face blank, but the weight of the stairs is real, pressing in from every direction. A pair of well-dressed white guests, sitting by the bar, exchange a look, one raising an eyebrow. The woman leans in, murmuring behind her hand, "Look at him, probably lost, doesn't know this is high-end territory." Her companion smirks. "Maybe he's here to clean up or something," he says, barely containing his laughter. The man walks past them without a glance. His eyes are locked on the far end of the room, where a velvet rope and gold-plated signage mark the entrance to the VIP lounge. He moves like he's been there before, like he knows exactly where he's going. But as he approaches the VIP entrance, the shift in atmosphere becomes obvious. The woman at the reception desk pauses her typing. She eyes him up and down with thinly veiled disdain, her smile fading. She doesn't greet him, doesn't ask if he needs help. Instead, she adjusts her blazer, and pretends to be busy. Still, the man doesn't stop. He walks toward the velvet rope with quiet confidence. Just a few feet from the entrance, a tall, well-built security guard steps forward from the side. The guard's uniform is crisp, his posture aggressive. His expression hardens as he sizes up the approaching figure. With a swift, practiced gesture, he extends one arm in front of the man, signaling him to halt. The guard narrows his eyes, and speaks with a flat, cold tone. "Sorry, sir, this area is for VIP guests only," he says, drawing out the word VIP with subtle emphasis. His gaze flicks over the man's body, the stretched hoodie, the cheap suitcase, the untidy shoes, and his lips twitch, just barely, with disdain. The man pauses. He looks up at the guard without blinking. His face remains unreadable, but there's something in his eyes, not defiance, not offense, but something quieter, deeper. He doesn't speak. He doesn't argue. Instead, he gives the guard a slight, polite nod, then he simply waits. The guard tilts his head, eyes narrowing with open judgment as he slowly scans the man standing in front of him. His gaze moves deliberately from the man's faded hoodie to his worn-out shoes, then settles on his large belly. There is no attempt to hide the disdain in his tone. "Hoodie, old sneakers, big gut, who do you think you are, exactly?" he says, his words sharp, his mouth curled into a half smirk. He doesn't lower his voice. He wants others to hear. A few feet away, a group of well-dressed guests glance over at the commotion. One of them, a man in a tailored white suit, lets out a short laugh. "Wow," he says loudly, turning to his companion, "we've got ourselves a real high roller here." Another guest joins in, clapping softly and sarcastically. "Man like that in the VIP lounge? I've seen better dressed delivery guys." Their laughter draws more eyes. The comments spread like ripples through the air. The ridicule is no longer subtle. It becomes a scene. Near the reception desk, a woman in a tight red dress leans back in her seat, sipping her drink. She looks at the man for a long moment, then rolls her eyes. "I thought this was a casino," she says to no one in particular, her voice loud and clear, "not a care facility for obese folks." Her smile is cruel, a flash of teeth meant to sting. The man stands in silence. He doesn't look away. He doesn't respond. But something shifts in his expression. His lips stay closed, his back remains straight, yet his eyes drop just slightly. Not in fear, not in defeat, but as though absorbing a pain that's all too familiar. His calm remains, but it is the kind of calm that has grown from years of being dismissed. The guard, encouraged by the laughter, leans in a little closer. "Look, if you're here to deliver something, the staff entrance is out back," he says, gesturing lazily toward the service corridor. His tone is condescending, final. Still quiet, the man reaches into his jacket and pulls out a smartphone. He taps on the screen, then holds it up, showing a photograph. It's a clean image. Something important. But the guard doesn't even glance. He waves a hand, irritated. "A phone doesn't make you a VIP, my friend," he growls. "Don't waste my time." The man blinks once. Slowly, he lowers the phone, puts it away, then places a hand into his other pocket. His movements are deliberate, steady. He doesn't rush. He knows what comes next. When his hand emerges, it holds a black card, smooth and reflective, embossed with a golden symbol. The guard's breath catches for half a second, though he doesn't say a word. The card gleams faintly under the lobby lights. The man holds it forward, just a few inches. Not with pride, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. The guard catches a glimpse of the card and freezes. His eyes, once filled with contempt, widen with disbelief. His posture shifts slightly. He leans in, trying to process what he's just seen. The black card gleams under the chandelier. Its surface is smooth, elegant, engraved with a small gold emblem. The symbol is unmistakable. Black diamond. A level reserved for elite investors. The kind of access only given to people with real power. For a second, the lobby goes quiet again. The whispers fade. The laughter stops. The man holding the card, still calm, speaks for the first time. His voice is low, steady, and clear. "My name is Marcus Holloway," he says, looking the guard directly in the eye. "I have a scheduled meeting with your senior manager." The guard's lips part, but no words come out. His voice stumbles when he finally tries. You said Holloway." His hands drop to his sides. His confidence crumbles in an instant. A nearby staff member, overhearing the exchange, rushes to check the reservation list. His eyes scan quickly, then stop. His face goes pale. He looks up, eyes wide. "Sir," he says, voice shaking slightly, "yes, Mr. Holloway is expected. And, he's listed as one of our major shareholders." Before the guard can respond, the elevator at the back of the lobby opens. A man in a navy suit steps out briskly. His badge reads General Operations Manager. He walks straight toward Marcus, his expression serious but respectful. As he reaches them, he stops and bows his head slightly. "Mr. Holloway," he says, "please accept our apologies for the inconvenience." Marcus gives a small nod, his expression unreadable. Around them, the mood in the room changes completely. The same guests who mocked him now watch in silence. The woman in red lowers her glass. The man in the white suit leans back, eyes narrowing with confusion. The guard, who had once blocked the way, stands frozen. His back is stiff, his eyes locked on the floor. He doesn't say another word. He can't. Marcus finally breaks the silence with a faint smile. It's not bitter. Not smug. Just tired. I'm used to it, he says softly. Then his tone shifts, firm and calm. But I didn't come here just to play cards. As Marcus follows the manager toward the VIP lounge, the noise of the casino fades behind him. The bright lights blur at the edges of his vision. For a brief moment, his steps slow. His thoughts drift backward, far from the polished floors and velvet curtains. He remembers being a child again. Sitting alone in the back of a crowded classroom. The desks were close together, but no one wanted to sit near him. He had learned early to expect the whispers. The names they called him still echo in his mind. Black elephant, walking meatball, words so cruel they stuck like thorns. Every day, he wore the same oversized shirt. Every day, someone laughed. Even the teachers weren't kind. One told him, in front of the whole class, that boys like him didn't win scholarships. Not with that look, she said, as if intelligence had a shape, a weight, a color. He remembered sitting there, frozen, while the others laughed around him. At home, things weren't better. His mother worked long hours cleaning houses. She barely slept. One evening, he had gone to the supermarket with her. A security guard followed them down every aisle. Then a manager told them to leave, saying they didn't belong in this kind of store. Marcus didn't argue. He just cried in the parking lot. But his mother had wiped his tears. Her voice was firm. They only see your skin and your size, she said, but they can't see your spirit. That's where your power is. From that day on, Marcus refused to be what they expected. He delivered newspapers before school, washed dishes after. At night, he sat in the public library, surrounded by books and silence. He taught himself how to code, how to build, how to dream bigger than anyone around him thought possible. By the time he was 23, he had started his first tech company. No one believed in him. He didn't need them to. Now, as he enters the VIP lounge, with people whispering his name and fearing their mistake, he remembers all of it. Not with anger, but with clarity. They used to laugh at him. Now, they don't even recognize him. Because Marcus Holloway, the boy they once called worthless, is now a billionaire. And no one ever saw it coming. Inside the velvet-lined walls of the VIP lounge, the sounds of the casino disappear. The air is cooler, quieter, filled with tension. Marcus sits across from the casino's top executives. The table between them is long, polished, and empty, except for a digital screen displaying the casino's performance metrics. But this meeting isn't about numbers. Marcus speaks first. His tone is calm, but firm. He points out what they all saw unfold just minutes earlier. The problem, he says, isn't your architecture, or your profits. It's your people. He pauses, letting the weight of that sentence land. Then he adds, more precisely, their attitude. Especially toward those who don't fit a certain image. The room is still. No one interrupts. He continues, explaining that this wasn't an isolated incident. Over the past year, Marcus has visited multiple branches of the casino group. Not as an investor, but as a guest. Dressed like today. Alone. No appointment. Just to see how staff would react. Some locations welcomed him. They asked questions, smiled, offered help. Those places, he says, received increased funding, new partnerships, better support. But others failed. Staff made assumptions based on skin tone, weight, or clothes. And at those branches, Marcus made changes. He replaced management, cut bonuses, rebuilt teams from the ground up. The general manager across the table swallows hard. He bows his head slightly and says, "Mr. Holloway, I deeply apologize for what happened here. It was unacceptable." Marcus doesn't smile. He doesn't nod. He looks at the manager and responds clearly. "I'm not here for apologies," he says. "I don't seek obedience. I seek respect." That single sentence hangs in the air. Heavy. True. The executives exchange glances. No one speaks. Then Marcus shifts the conversation. He proposes a new training initiative. A mandatory program for all employees across every location. A course built on dignity, empathy, and service without judgment. He calls it the guest without a label. The room responds quickly. The manager agrees immediately, almost with relief. "We'll begin development this week," he says, "and it will be implemented company-wide." Marcus gives a small nod. The meeting isn't long, but its impact is lasting. He didn't come here to gamble. He came to transform. After the meeting, Marcus turns to the manager and makes a quiet request. He wants to see the guard again. The one who stopped him at the door. The manager hesitates for a second, then nods and makes the call. A few minutes later, the guard walks into the room. He no longer carries himself with confidence. His steps are slower. His shoulders are stiff. He keeps his eyes low, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. The silence between them is thick, but Marcus waits. Calm, composed, thoughtful. Finally, Marcus speaks. His voice is quiet, but direct. "Do you remember what you said to me at the entrance?" he asks. The guard stands frozen. His mouth opens, but no words come out at first. Then, barely audible, he mutters, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." Marcus watches him. He doesn't interrupt. He lets the man sit with those words. Then he asks another question. "Do you believe someone who looks like me," Marcus pauses, his tone steady, "can't be successful because of how I appear?" The guard hesitates, then slowly nods. "I didn't think," he says, voice trembling, "I just assumed. And I was rude. Truly. I'm sorry." There is no anger in Marcus's expression. No bitterness in his words. "I've heard worse," he replies. "But what you said today reminded me why change matters." The guard lifts his eyes for the first time. There is shame there, but also something else. Regret. A need to make it right. Marcus continues. "I'm not here to punish you," he says. "I want to offer you something instead." The guard looks confused. "I'm starting a new training program," Marcus says. "It's about breaking bias. Seeing people for who they are, not what they seem to be. I'd like you to be part of it." The guard blinks, clearly surprised. "You want me, in the program?" Marcus nods. "Yes. 2 weeks. You'll work directly with me." The room is still. The guard takes a deep breath, then whispers, "Thank you. I'll do better." Marcus doesn't smile, but there is something softer in his eyes now. He extends a hand. The guard looks at it, then reaches out slowly. This is not about forgiveness. It's about a beginning. The guard accepts Marcus's invitation without hesitation. The next morning, he shows up early to the training room, nervous but determined. Marcus is already there, speaking with a small group of new hires. The space is quiet, open, and welcoming. There are no uniforms, no ranks. Just people, gathered to learn. The program begins with listening. Real stories from real people in the service industry. Stories of being judged, ignored, laughed at. The guard sits still, his eyes fixed ahead, but his expression shifts with each account. He hears the pain in their voices. He recognizes the patterns. He realizes he's been part of them. Marcus shares more of his own journey too. He talks about growing up being underestimated. About fighting through stereotypes, not with anger, but with purpose. He explains how he learned to carry himself with pride, even when others tried to strip it away. His voice doesn't preach. It reaches. Day by day, the guard begins to change. He listens more. Speaks less. He starts greeting people differently. With warmth. With sincerity. He no longer looks for cues in someone's clothes or skin. He asks questions instead of making assumptions. He watches Marcus closely, not out of awe, but out of quiet respect. In one session, the guard stands up and apologizes to the group. Not just for what happened to Marcus, but for every moment he let bias guide his actions. His voice cracks as he says, "I didn't realize how blind I was. I thought I knew people by looking at them. I didn't know I was looking through walls I built myself." Marcus nods and replies gently, "If you want to change others, start by changing yourself." 2 weeks pass. The program ends with a small ceremony. Nothing flashy. Just handshakes, certificates, and a shared meal. The guard is asked to speak. He steps forward, heart pounding, hands trembling slightly. He takes a deep breath. "I used to only see what I wanted to see," he says slowly, his eyes scanning the room. "Now, I've learned to see with my heart." The room falls quiet. Then comes the sound of soft applause. Not for perfection, but for growth. The story spreads faster than anyone could have imagined. Within hours, social media platforms are flooded with clips and headlines. Billionaire denied entry to VIP lounge due to appearance. The footage of Marcus standing calmly, holding out his black diamond card, is shared by millions. People repost it with disbelief, outrage, admiration. The narrative shifts quickly. It's no longer just a story about a casino. It becomes a mirror for society. News outlets pick it up. Journalists write headlines like, "A priceless lesson in kindness and humility." Opinion pieces flood in. Some focus on the danger of snap judgments. Others praise Marcus for responding with grace instead of vengeance. Talk shows begin reaching out. Morning news, evening panels, podcasts. Everyone wants to speak with Marcus. He agrees to a few. In each appearance, he sits calmly under the studio lights, answering questions with quiet honesty. One host leans forward and asks, "What stopped you from getting angry that day?" Most people would have lost their temper. Marcus looks at her and replies without hesitation. "I don't need to prove my worth to anyone," he says. "I know who I am." His words are simple, but they land deeply. There is no bitterness in his voice. Just clarity. The video clips of his interviews rack up millions of views. People in the comments write about how the story changed the way they think. How it made them pause before judging others. Many admit they would have acted like the guard, and they feel ashamed. Some even say they reached out to apologize to someone they once mistreated. Soon, Marcus begins receiving invitations from companies. They ask him to speak to their teams, to help them rebuild their workplace cultures. Not because of his money, but because of his values. He becomes more than a successful businessman. He becomes a symbol of leadership through empathy. At the end of the quarter, industry publications release their annual reports. Casino Lux is listed as one of the most improved service brands of the year. The report notes, a powerful transformation sparked by one man's quiet strength. One quiet morning, Marcus finds an envelope slipped between business files on his desk. There is no return address. The handwriting on the front is shaky, unfamiliar. He opens it slowly, curious. Inside is a folded letter. Handwritten. Simple paper. No signature, no title. As he begins to read, his heart tightens. The words come from someone he hadn't thought about in years. A former classmate. Someone from those early days when life was hard and school felt like a battlefield. The letter starts with an apology. No excuses. Just raw, honest regret. I used to look down on you, it says. I laughed at your weight, your clothes, your quietness. I joined in when others mocked you. Now I look back and feel nothing but shame. You didn't deserve that. No one does. Marcus pauses. He doesn't cry. He doesn't frown. He just sits with it. The pain from the past brushes up against the peace he's found in the present. He folds the letter gently and places it beside him. For a moment, he says nothing. Later that day, he replies with a short email. His words are soft. Only a few lines. I forgave you a long time ago, he writes. I hope you found peace too. He doesn't ask for more. He doesn't expect a reply. The letter, though anonymous, doesn't get filed away. Marcus has it framed. It hangs on the wall of his office. Not to remember the insult, but to remember the growth. To remember how far he's come. Sometimes, when people visit his office and ask about it, he tells them, the people who try to break you often forget what they did. But you remember. And if you're strong enough, you use it to build something better. That's how Marcus lives. Not with bitterness. Not with blame. But with quiet strength. He carries the weight of old wounds not as scars, but as reminders. He does not seek revenge. He seeks growth. A few weeks later, the sun rises over Las Vegas with its usual golden blaze. Outside the casino, cameras are already flashing, banners are fluttering, and the staff is lined up in crisp uniforms. Today is the grand opening of a newly renovated VIP wing, and Marcus Holloway is the guest of honor. He steps out of a sleek black car, not in a designer suit, but in his usual quiet style, comfortable, clean, unpretentious. As he walks through the front doors, the atmosphere shifts. Every employee lowers their head in a respectful nod. No one looks past him. No one makes assumptions. They greet him now with sincerity, with dignity. At the front of the line stands a familiar face. The guard who once stopped him now wears a tailored uniform and a name tag that reads Service Manager. His posture is upright, but this time, not stiff with pride. It is shaped by humility. He approaches Marcus, offers his hand, and says softly, "Welcome back, sir." Marcus shakes his hand and smiles. "I can see you've truly changed," he says. It isn't a compliment. It's recognition. Earned. Honest. Inside, the press gathers in anticipation. Lights are set, microphones positioned. Marcus is invited to the stage to speak. He doesn't read from a script. He simply stands there, the same man who was once judged for his size, his skin, his silence. He begins with calm words. "I didn't come here to prove anything about status," he says. "I came here to plant the seed of change." His voice is steady, his eyes moving across the crowd. Applause breaks out. Loud, but not chaotic. It carries respect. A few people in the audience stand. The staff claps the hardest. Marcus remains still for a moment, taking it in. Not for glory. Not for validation. But because this moment is no longer about him. He doesn't stand tall because of his bank account. He stands tall because of who he chose to become. A man who turned rejection into action. A man who never forgot where he came from, or who he could lift on his way up. As Marcus steps out of the casino, the sun is lower now, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The celebration behind him fades into the hum of evening traffic. But something catches his eye just beyond the entrance. A boy. Small, chubby, dark-skinned. He stands alone near the steps, his hands tucked in the pockets of an oversized jacket. Nearby, a group of kids are laughing. One of them points at the boy and shouts, "You'll never be rich, fat boy." The others snicker and run off, leaving him there, silent and still. Marcus watches. His heart tightens. The boy doesn't cry. He doesn't chase after them. He just stares at the ground, blinking fast, trying to hold it in. Marcus walks over, slow and gentle. He bends slightly, lowers his voice. "Do you like technology?" he asks. The boy looks up, startled at first. Then he nods. His eyes shine with something that hasn't been crushed yet. Hope. "Yes," he says. "I love computers. And robots. I want to build things." Marcus smiles. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a business card. He hands it to the boy, holding it carefully between his fingers. "When you turn 18, Marcus says, come find me." The boy takes the card with both hands. He looks at it, reads the name out loud. "Marcus Holloway," he whispers. "Founder of Tech Rise Global." For a moment, he doesn't move. Then he clutches the card to his chest like it's made of gold. "I'll remember you," he says, beaming. "I promise." Marcus stands upright again. He doesn't say anything else. He just gives the boy a nod and turns to leave. His steps are light. Not because of the applause he received earlier, or the articles being written about him. But because he knows. In that small moment, he didn't just offer advice. He offered a future. He passed on the same flame his mother once lit in him. Marcus did not win by power or wealth. He won by character, by wisdom, and by compassion. What made him extraordinary was not the number in his bank account, but the way he carried himself through judgment, through pain, and through silence. This story was never just about one man being insulted. It was about all of us. About the way we look at others, and how quickly we decide who is worthy and who is not. It was about the harm we can cause when we mistake appearance for truth. Ask yourself, have you ever looked at someone and assumed the worst? Have you ever hurt someone, not with your hands, but with your eyes or your silence? If so, you are not alone. But you can change that. We all can. Sometimes, it takes just one moment to see clearly. To pause. To listen. To open your heart instead of closing your mind. When we do that, we don't just change how we treat others. We change who we become. If this story touched something in you, share it. Leave a comment. Subscribe to Black Excellence. Let's keep spreading these stories. Stories that remind us what it means to lead with empathy, to live with purpose, and to see one another as human. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.